China has done it now, the thing Bitcoin likes the most. Here, the payload is running at full speed, the money supply is completely escalating. But on the other hand, we're also seeing massive sell-offs. Apparently, a whale is selling 16,000 Bitcoin here. That could be what's triggered the massive volatility in Bitcoin right now. The small pullback, but the underlying trend is still ongoing. Bitcoin is ready here to break out to higher levels now, even though we'll keep seeing pullbacks from time to time. In every bull run, in every stock market, we always have the surges, but then also the smaller pullbacks again and again. So you shouldn't let yourself get completely freaked out now, just because some people are already saying it's over. Here, stock market bull run, everything has dropped. Here, Bitcoin is going to fall to $0. Wall Street is making a statement right now, and bam, that Bitcoin will rise to 350,000 US dollars. That's probably the long-term outlook. That's more likely the mark that Bitcoin has to measure up to. And don't let yourself get all worked up over some short-term setbacks. Panic sell, and then regret it later when the Bitcoin price is much higher. But first, let's smash that like button down below for new all-time highs and even higher prices. We need the momentum now, so that even more people get these videos shared with them, so make sure to hit the like button down below. Smash it, for the algorithm, for Bitcoin, for freedom, for love, for harmony, for better fans. Right here and now, I'm going to pull this up. We actually have David Bailey here, who says, gold parity is now the floor price of Bitcoin, meaning gold parity is what's really the floor price here, what is being targeted now, and what truly represents the long-term potential of Bitcoin. But it's only the floor price. That means, yes, Bitcoin can go much, much higher, which is also what I expect. So gold will be a level that will be caught up to here, but it won't stop there. And that's the thing. Some people think, okay, it'll go to 1 million, and then that's where it stops rising. No, no, no. Bitcoin has no upper limit because fiat has no lower limit. And that's why To The Mark is also saying here, hey, attention everyone, heads up. Bitcoin is near an all-time high against gold. Expect fireworks when we clearly surpass the 1 kilogram per Bitcoin mark. So if we clearly break through this level up here, then there could be some serious fireworks. Not literally rockets being launched, of course, but that the Bitcoin price could shoot up. And we just had a super exciting price movement here, which probably also led to the Bitcoin price cooling off a bit. It's all relative, of course, but we can see it here. Whales buying Bitcoin nonstop. That was the news just yesterday. Whales buying Bitcoin like crazy. And then last night, we actually saw this little dip in Bitcoin. And then we see that since 80,000 Bitcoin, just now 16,843 Bitcoin worth $2 billion US dollars were sold. Sold for $2 billion US dollars after they were bought 14 years ago for 16,000 US dollars. What a legend, seriously, you can only say it, an absolute legend, a hardcore hodler. I mean, just let that sink in, really take it in. He lived through FTX, he lived through MTGOX, he experienced so much stuff here. The strategic Bitcoin reserve ETFs recently, but of course all the stuff before that too, he experienced it all. And often it's just like this. When you hold Bitcoin for so long, at some point the incentive to sell just gets so high. We'll keep seeing this from time to time, that even whales are selling Bitcoin here. So yeah, and you never really know exactly what happens with it afterwards. I don't know. 16,000 Bitcoin. What are you supposed to buy with that? You could buy an entire country with that. I have no idea what he's going to do with those 16,000 Bitcoin now. There was also a statement from David Bailey about this, an assessment. Yes, OG Bitcoiners are selling part of their stacks for a better quality of life, but that's not the same as cashing out. In my network, there are more OGs than ever today. They're convinced by Bitcoin, and we're seeing that more and more. So, for example, people like Adam Back, who was already mentioned in the original Bitcoin white paper, and so on. For example, real OGs who have been around for a very, very long time, some of them are even buying more Bitcoin instead of selling. And at some point, it just doesn't matter anymore whether you buy Bitcoin or not. Because, for example, I can imagine Nathan Beck will have so much Bitcoin. If you have, say, 10,000 Bitcoin, whether you have one more or one less, it really doesn't make a difference anymore. And that's why sometimes people do sell. And yeah, that's just totally normal. I mean, it's actually good because it shakes out a few people who wanted to sell anyway. That's always the thing. We need a seller rotation first. The weak hands, the ones who might want to sell, they need to be shaken out of the market. And once this resistance is broken, then even with relatively little capital, with relatively little news, and whatever else, and all the hype, Bitcoin can shoot up to new all-time highs here. But first, all these resistance levels need to be cleared out of the way. Write down in the comments below at what price you would have to sell your Bitcoin. How high would Bitcoin have to go? And can you imagine holding on to Bitcoin for 14 years straight? I mean, I know a lot of people who say, hey, they'll never sell their Bitcoin, they'll take it to the grave, they just want to hodl all the way through. And then something crazy happened here. Check this out. Monetary printer goes BRR. Right in your face here. China just printed 700 billion US dollars. And just take a look at this insane God candle here. This is, now it's not loading. Here, bam, here, liquidity. To the moon, bam, then over here. And we can see that this just happened here recently. This is now being shared like crazy everywhere. You can see here too, 600,000 views here in the comments. Holy shit. And we know that it's always very, very positive for Bitcoin, no matter who's printing, whether it's the ECB, the Federal Reserve, or even China or Japan. Doesn't matter at all which central banks are printing here. As soon as money is printed here, it's positive for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is correlated with the M2 money supply by 83%. And of course, there are a lot of speculations about this now. You always have to, say that. Of course, it's always easier to just post these kinds of charts. Sometimes they also have the wrong, metrics and are shifted and so on. And then afterwards, everything looks way more bullish than it actually is and so on. So you have to look at this a bit critically as well. But in principle, the general trend is correct. I also watched a few discussions about this yesterday. On X, for example, where people were saying, yeah, they have two money supplies and so on. That's what's crucial here. Others, on the other hand, said that's not what's crucial. In the long run, the M2 money supply will probably be very relevant. But in the short term, you can't really say that just because the money supply increases by such and such a percent, then 3 weeks later or 8 weeks later, the Bitcoin price has to rise by exactly the same percentage. So you can't really make such precise measurements here. Or if, say, 3 billion are printed, then Bitcoin rises by 0.3%. Or you can't establish such exact correlations like some people do. That can be misleading at times. But we had these reports here. I already told you back then. China unveils fresh stimulus to boost high-quality economic development. And actually, this isn't a new article here, but what was basically announced back then, you can now see that reflected in the money supply. It seems to be mirrored here again. It says here that various measurements would be implemented, so to speak. Here, central banks will create new monetary policy tools to support the stable development of the stock market, it said. So, back then it really went so far that they wanted to support the stock market here by using newly printed money, not to prop up the government bond market and buy up government bonds, as sometimes happens with the ECB, but rather they want to use the newly printed money to directly pump it all into the stock market. I mean, that's absolutely insane. Just think about that for a second. The stock market here is being directly stimulated with new money. You can hardly imagine that here in Europe or even in the US, that's still almost unimaginable, but in China, it's actually happening. In the making here, Penn added that China will lower mortgage rates on existing home loans to a level similar to those of newly issued house loans. So, they also want to tackle the home loans, they want to bring them down. Basically, with these new monetary measures, it's not just printing money, it's also about this. Interest rate manipulation, things like that, to bring down housing prices. That's exactly what's currently being demanded by the Federal Agency of Housing Finance, or whatever it's called, in the US by Pulte. Hey, Jerome Powell needs to go. He needs to step down so that housing prices can improve again and mortgage rates can go down so people can afford to buy homes again. Then there's monetary stimulus. Here's Pan, governor of the People's Bank of China. The Jerome Powell of China says that China wants to, lower the reserve requirements, basically for the fractional reserve system. How much minimum reserve you need here to create money, that should also be changed. You can already see there are different levers for how money can enter the market. On the one hand, by directly buying stocks, on the other hand, by changing interest rates, and also by changing the minimum reserve requirement. That means there are different tools for printing money here, but in the end, it all leads to pumping up Bitcoin. Every form of money printing, every form of monetary expansion is very, very good for the Bitcoin price. That's why this is very, very welcome. For people who are saving, it's always a shame. I always feel a bit sorry for the people who aren't informed about this. So make sure to hit the subscribe button below so you don't miss anything. And then you can defend yourselves here because this is financial self-defense, what's happening here. This isn't really optional, it's actually something truly essential that's going on here. And now just take a look at how bullish this is. Absolutely crazy statement.
I am a firm believer that it's going much, much higher from here. Think about corporate adoption. Corporate adoption is probably only about 2%. Central banks, only about 3%. Those are both going higher, much higher. Retail investors going much higher.
Very confident here. The Bitcoin price is going to rise much, much higher. They're talking here about corporate adoption being only around 2%. That just means there's still a lot of room to grow. He's talking here about 3% central bank adoption. I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. I think the adoption by central banks is actually much lower. But that's also what I always tell you, if we compare it to the internet or something like that, then right now we're basically somewhere around 1996 or so. That means we're at a point where social media hasn't even started yet. We're at the point where all the big stories on the internet didn't even exist yet, where the internet was still clunky, still difficult, and so on. And now Wall Street is catching on to this too. And for those who don't know him, this guy is a real Wall Street legend. Honestly, we didn't know him either, but it's true. Crazy. Now listen to what else he has to say. Now he's about to give his Bitcoin price prediction.
So look at it through, I'll leave off with this. Look at it through the market cap of Bitcoin. That's around 2 trillion, let's say. Look at the market cap of gold. That's around 20 trillion. Maybe it doesn't have to be gold, but if it closes the gap to 50%, you're looking at $500,000 per Bitcoin.
So, did you hear that? Bitcoin here with a 2 trillion market cap. You really have to let that sink in. And in comparison, gold is at 20 trillion. Actually, it's already at 22 trillion. I didn't even have the latest numbers. That means we're looking at almost a tenfold increase in the price of Bitcoin to catch up with gold. And that's why he says here, Bitcoin will rise to $500,000. But that's actually very, very conservative, because if we reach gold's level, we're actually already at $1 million. And if we assume that as Bitcoin rises, the price of gold will also continue to go up. That means once we reach parity, Bitcoin will already be at 25, 26, 27 million. So we're actually already above the million mark here. And it's just crazy that these kinds of predictions aren't coming from some random freaks running half naked through El Salvador, but from Wall Street suit wearers who are now trying to outdo each other with Bitcoin price forecasts.
And I do think that in the iShot, you're looking at 250, 350,000 pretty easily for crypto. There's a couple of things, a couple of hurdles, but I think those days of it losing 80% of its value and then rallying up are long gone. There's too many people that are looking for the asset.
That's
350,000, 500,000. These are all levels that Bitcoin can reach in the blink of an eye. That's what he's saying here, and he also simply says it will no longer give those crazy impressions. That's also what we're already seeing in this cycle. The volatility is going down simply because institutional money is now in the game, Wall Street is in the game, the big players are in the game. And it's no longer just the dumb money, the retail investors, sure, they might be coming back in now too, but that leads to reduced volatility. When volatility goes down, it becomes even more interesting for even more big players. That means even more money flows into Bitcoin, which means the Bitcoin price climbs even higher. And what happens when the Bitcoin price climbs even higher? Then the Bitcoin price rises even higher, simply because the price is going up. And that's when retail investors jump in as well. Then it gets even more interesting, the media gets involved, and a lot more happens. And it's just the catalyst, the upward spiral. How do you say it? Not a death spiral, but here it's a massive spiral that keeps pumping Bitcoin to ever higher prices. And of course, we'll always see some pullbacks, but honestly, those 90% corrections are probably a thing of the past. At least here with Bitcoin, there's just way too much stability in the market now. And that's what makes it so bullish to see how things are developing. How do you see it? If you were to buy a Bitcoin now, let me know and I'll drop a link. 21 Bitcoin with the code BitcoinHodler. They're still up to 20% off the fees. If you're buying Bitcoin, feel free to check it out. Absolutely recommended. And I'll see you guys until then.